special day for you. I never asked you about the September 11th. Where were you in that times?
On September 11th, I was in my office. It was a very bright, clear blue day. Looking outside, it was really unusually blue sky, sunny day, and I was chairman of the political science department at Columbia during that time, and I was in my office checking my email, getting ready to go to class, and I had the radio on, and I heard about everything that happened, and then I went to class. Everybody was shell shocked, but I was teaching a statistics class, but I held the class, not knowing that the university had already canceled classes for the day. So I taught a class that didn't have to occur, and so that was where I was. I was living up on the near Columbia's campus on the upper west side. I live downtown right now, so I'm looking out my window right now. I can actually see the World Trade Center site. I actually live down there.
At the level no more than 2% a year. Do you think that maybe Trump is a symbol of American of material discomfort with harder times for the U.S.?
Well, I think a lot of his support came from people who've been affected adversely by changes in the economy, particularly people in parts of the country who had and maybe more so in small towns and even rural areas that were involved in production and manufacturing of a sort that wound up leaving the country or was affected by automation and had lost jobs, and it meant that their economic circumstances became more tentative or had turned for the worst. So there was an economic status aspect to support for Trump, but there were a lot of other aspects as well.
Circumstances related that what you were talking.
Yeah, it was. I mean, the battle in terms of the election is to some extent for the support of voters in the Midwest who live in rural areas and small towns, and the Democrats, in order to win the election and to recover from 2016, they need to win Michigan, Wisconsin, or Pennsylvania, which they had lost, in a strikingly unexpected way, or they'll have to pick up some other states like Florida and Arizona. And so, for Trump, those states are very important. He doesn't need to win all three of them, but he needs to win, one of them and hold on to everything that he won also in 2016. And right now, the polls show that Biden is ahead slightly in all those areas.
I see Trump maybe winning Ohio and Wisconsin, and maybe some pollsters talk about maybe Pennsylvania could be the tipping point of the election.
Well,
Do you have a similar impression?
Well, Ohio has turned into a Republican state, and that's a state I think Trump is expected to win, although the polls there are very close. Wisconsin, the latest polls show that he's behind. He's behind there. But if he were to win just Wisconsin, you mentioned Pennsylvania, if he wins just Wisconsin and holds on to Ohio and all the other states that he won in 2016, he'll win the election. The Democrats need Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, unless they can get some other states, and those states are still their best opportunity. I mean, Biden is currently ahead in slightly in Florida and also Arizona, and so those are states to watch as well. Ohio is an important state. If Trump doesn't win Ohio, that's a sign that the election will be a disaster for the Republicans.
Bob, there is an impression, but maybe in the media, that that Trump had a rebound after the Republican National Convention.
It was definitely an impression, and it was the impression that I had as well watching the convention. There was some polling data that came out early afterwards that showed that he had picked up a couple of points. But the current polls, the current polls show that whatever he picked up, hasn't been enough to make a difference in terms of the Democratic lead. It is the case in some of these crucial states. Biden is ahead maybe by a little less than he was before. I think overall, I think it's safe to say that the Republican convention, I mean, it served them well. If they didn't pick up additional support, it certainly helped energize and solidify the support among his base, and that was precisely what the convention, first and foremost, was designed to do.
Do you imagine Trump maybe he could galvanize his base of 2016, and maybe the Democrats need more margin in relation to a higher turnout?
Yeah, well,
in this election.
I think it's absolutely the case that to a significant extent, Trump has or will galvanize his base, as you say. The question is, has that base become a little bit smaller because people have been unhappy with, his personal style as president and all of the the recent revelations that have come out about his lying about things, his handling of the virus, his statements about his statements in private about the military. So the big question is, has he the base is there for the most part, but if he's lost a little of it, that little that he's lost can make a difference in those three particular states. But he definitely has this strong base of support. And then there's the question of whether there are other voters he can pick up, whether he can increase even slightly his support among Black voters or Latino voters to make up for any loss of votes. He's got his work cut out for him, given what happened in the 2018 election. But even if Trump's base were fully intact, whether it's intact or not, the Democrats need to mobilize their base, particularly African American voters and younger voters, and certain kinds of women voters in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And keep in mind, just the numbers here are small. He won those three states by less than 90,000 votes. So we're not talking about a lot of votes that Democrats have to make up.
Biden could enlarge the base of Hillary of 2016.
Yes.
Do you imagine that?
Yes. Black voter turnout fell off in 2016 compared to 2012 and 2018. And the way those numbers played out, that could have made all the difference in those three states. There were also arguments about voter suppression among those groups as well. But I think the turnout was low because those voters were less enthusiastic about Hillary Clinton than they had been about Barack Obama.
In our last conversation, we talked about that the economy were decisive in relation to this election. And I'm seeing maybe it's only a sensation that the economy is recovering now. It's only a sensation, an impression of the media, or maybe it's something that is occurring now in the States.
Okay. Well, first to be clear, the economy can be very important. Second, the current economy in the United States is a disaster. Before the pandemic, the unemployment rate was very low. The stock market was doing well. Trump could claim credit not only for all the things he accomplished that he had promised to do for his base of conservative Republican supporters, but the crown jewel of his accomplishment was the economy. In terms of GDP isn't going to reach the levels that you mentioned before, but the unemployment rate was really very low, well under 4%, and among all segments of society, he could really claim credit for that. But since the pandemic, the unemployment rate is now just below 10%, and compared to what it was when he took office, it's a disaster. And under normal circumstances, a president overseeing an economy that's in that bad shape would not get reelected. What's holding Trump up is that the kind of solid support he has among his particular base, and the degree of kind of partisan polarization that exists today, where both parties are trying to build enough to win from their bases of support.
Probabilities of 8-2 a couple of months ago. Do you think maybe we could keep that forecast, or maybe?
Yeah. The forecasts were of different sorts. I don't know which probabilities of Biden winning that you were referring to. I think Nate Silver At one point in 538 had it at 80%. Now it's closer to around 70%. But what's built into that is the state of the economy, and especially the current poll results. Now, of course, here the national poll results, everyone I think thinks are pretty accurate. There doesn't look like Trump has any chance of winning the national popular vote. The states, if the quality of the state polls is what they were in 2016, we have really a very close race, and it's not 70-30. It's something closer to that. I think in terms of the assumption that the state polls probably are a little bit better, but I don't think than they were. They're better than they were in 2016. But it's still hard to predict what the composition of the electorate is going to look like on election day. If this were a public opinion poll that you wanted to know what percent of the people support Trump, based on that, we can be confident that it's 70%. But of those people, what's going to be the composition of those who show up on election day, which could be different enough that the margin isn't 70, isn't Biden ahead, but it's much closer, and perhaps Trump winning in particular states. So I think that this is going to be a very close election, and we're really not going to know until the votes are counted, unless something else strikingly happens and the polls really get very lopsided toward one candidate or the other.
Bob, a black swan is by definition unpredictable, but could you imagine some kind of a black swan before the election?
Well, the kinds of black swans that could occur before and the real black swans would be one of the candidates dropping out of the race, or something happening to one of the candidates. That would be a real black swan. The other kind, but the other more plausible black swan that people are thinking about is some kind of all kinds of turmoil in counting the votes that are cast by mail on election day or after election day, that will delay the vote count in a way that could really throw the country into conflict over who the winner is. And here we're talking about disputes about what votes should be counted, whether they came in late or on time, and the counting of the votes themselves. And Trump himself has been talking about this being the most, what we're going to see is the most corrupt and fraudulent election in American history. So he's kind of stoking that. He's stroking that black swan, so to speak. But in terms of other, black swan, the other black swans would be, something miraculous occurring with regard to the pandemic, and it disappears, and everybody can go back to work. That would be, a real black swan that would work to Trump's advantage.